an invitation to really pay attention to, like, what energies are there in me today? What are my impulses? What are my needs? Like, what am I desiring? What am I moving away from? And yeah, noticing that there are certain times in the cycle where I feel more frisky and interested in sex, and there are certain times where it's the last thing on my mind, and then there are times where I want this kind of sex or that kind of intimacy, or yeah, so it becomes more of a journey of like discovery, and perhaps easier to just meet what's there and be curious rather than have an expectation and a sense of should and guilt about not feeling the same way every day.
Welcome to the Wildflow podcast with me, Charlotte Puanto, certified cycle and feminine embodiment coach and shamanic womb guide. In this podcast, I'll share my wisdom and conversations with powerful change makers, thought leaders, and embodied teachers to invite you to live cyclically in flow with your menstrual cycle instead of fearing it, to heal menstrual shame and normalize womb wisdom and period positivity, and to step into your sovereign magnetic power to create and embody the change you desire to see in your world. Settle in to unleash your wild flow. Welcome to Wild Flow for a really beautiful, nourishing conversation about sex and the cycle with our guest, Ruby May. I've been wanting to have a conversation about sex and sexuality on the podcast for some time now. Sex, desire, sexuality, and sexual pleasure are such taboos and often get left to the wayside, and yet it's such an intrinsic part of our menstrual cycle and of humanity, so we can't ignore it. I'm glad that we're now having this conversation. This conversation left me feeling nourished, connected, soft, curious, and whole, which I wasn't expecting. So I hope that in listening you feel that way too. Allow me to introduce you to our guest, Ruby. Ruby May is a devotee of the yin, facilitator, community and connection catalyst. She's midwifing a world in which cyclical awareness is integrated into the way we relate and shape the world. With a background in working professionally with intimacy and sexuality, and a stint working as a dominatrix, Ruby became fascinated in the phenomena of feminine leadership and how the womb could become a gateway into embodying this. Ruby is the community leader for the graduates of the Menstruality Leadership Program for the Red School, which is the biggest education centre globally for menstrual cycle awareness, and her own initiative, Know Your Flow. Both support the cultivation of community for developing body literacy, inspired leadership and social change with over 200 members from over 20 countries. The author of Know Your Flow, a cycle tracking journal for personal and planetary revolution, and the creatrix behind The Game, Ruby currently lives in the creative cauldron of Berlin in Germany. So listen, enjoy, share with your partner and friends maybe, and allow this conversation to inspire you into deeper relationship with yourself, your body, your cyclical experience, and your sexuality. Happy listening. Ruby May, welcome to Wildflow Podcast. How are you today?
I am happy to be here. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming on. I'm so excited to have this conversation and get to know you and your work and see where we go down this rabbit hole about sex and sexuality and the menstrual cycle. So I'd love to start with a cycle check-in and invite you to share, if you have a menstrual cycle, whereabouts in your cycle you are today, and how that feels for you. And otherwise, do you connect in with any other seasons and cycles, and just how's that influencing you today? And then I'll share mine afterwards, if that's okay.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for the invitation. So it is morning here and evening where you are, and I'm grateful for this invitation because I haven't had much time for a little internal check-in. So I am, I think, day 10. And because the cycle before this one was a 95-day cycle, and I'm kind of getting a bit perimenopausal, I feel a little disorientated in my cycle, even though, yeah, well, I had a long one and then a very short one. So um, I'm feeling definitely still like expanding outwards and sort of riding a wave of energy into life. I haven't quite started receding yet. But I still feel a bit like, oh, I'm not quite sure how I feel. What I feel more strongly is the larger seasonal cycle. I adore this time of year. Um, I feel like each year towards the winter solstice, I deepen my experience of it. And I have this beautiful luxury, which shouldn't be a luxury, but this year I'm really relaxed. Like I've managed to, I don't know if I've consciously created it or it's a bit of luck as well, but I'm not so busy. So I feel like I'm really slowing down and I'm simplifying and I'm feeling the call to just, yeah, really simplify. So that's very present with me this morning.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah.
That's so interesting to hear. There's a few things in there that you talked about: the season, the slowing down, the simplifying, but then also um, your experience of having such a long cycle beforehand, and that you said you're moving into perimenopause, and just how that can be, I feel, disorienting. And you said you weren't
Mm.
quite sure where you're at and how you're feeling in that. And so I think that that's really insightful for anyone else who's listening, who's sort of experiencing varying cycles and wondering, feeling a bit lost perhaps, and
Mm-hmm.
hearing you speaking to the larger cycle, the season, as a way of holding you, even when
Yeah.
things are a bit unknown and
And
unpredictable.
if I may add on, that the biggest gift for me in having an unpredictable cycle is that I realized when your cycle is like clockwork and you know about the inner seasons and you have that map in your awareness, it's very easy to then be like, oh, I'm day 10, therefore I must be feeling this way, and have that influence you, even though consciously you're really trying not to do that. But I noticed that, wow, I've really been doing that.
Mm,
And so to not have a map and have to be able to just be all the more present with yourself to discover how you are and what's actually going on is a good muscle to use. Yeah.
mm. I think that's such a great point. Thanks for adding that in. I think
Mm.
that's something I've often had thoughts of similar nature before, of where menstrual cycle awareness is such a powerful, incredible tool, but we have to be careful not to tip into its gospel, in that way of, like you said,
Yeah.
like, well, I'm here, and so this is the archetypal experience of
Mhm.
that. And you're trying to squeeze yourself into a box of, yes, I am feeling like that, aren't I? And
Yeah.
in fact, you're really not. And I've had quite a few years differently, but postpartum breastfeeding, not having menstrual cycles for quite a
Mhm.
lot of the last, for about 5 years, I reckon there.
Mhm.
And well, and when it returned, just being very unpredictable, and just finding that the more I could just let go of needing to have as a regular cycle, and instead just in the moment tuning into how I'm feeling and what I need at that
Mhm.
time, and saying, well, today I feel autumnal, even though yesterday I felt really spring-like,
Mhm.
and letting it bounce around a little bit um, had supported me in that. So I love hearing that that's supporting you at
Mm.
this time in your cycle, this time in your life. It's, yeah, fascinating. Thank you for adding that in. Hmm. So I do my check-in. So I'm cycle day 19 today, and I had to just check before we started recording. I thought, oh, because I find that more and more that I have a loose grip on exactly which day I'm on. And for
Mhm.
me, it's more, I know within a few days whereabouts I am, even if I don't know, day 19. And so I still have that awareness and that knowledge of like, this is where I am, but without needing to be so purist about it, perhaps.
Mhm.
Um, and today I really felt a shift. Um, Over the last few days, I've had some really good resilience and energy and capacity. I've got small children and they're on school holidays now, and I've been like, "Come on, kids,
Mhm.
we can do this." And today
Mhm.
I had a day to myself, and it was a perfect day for it because I felt so tired. Um, and I had to lie down this afternoon. I thought, oh, just go and have a 5 minute, just curl up on the couch. And
Mhm.
I did nod off and I thought, oh, isn't that beautiful? And I was thinking, oh, like how clear were my thoughts and how articulate am I going to be for a podcast episode and all of those kind of thoughts coming in. And I noticed real feelings of vulnerability today as well, and this real tenderness. And I sat down and did look at the day and kind of really worked out exactly where I am. I thought, yeah, this is that point for me where I clunk over and I drop
Mhm.
down a gear and I go, I have a wobble. And then after the wobble passes, I'll be fine. But it's that
Yeah.
wobbly point. So that's where I am right now.
Mhm.
Um, and as you mentioned, it's evening time. So the sun is just setting. We've got summer solstice and your winter solstice in 1 week. So at that real peak, the poles of the cycle, and it's been really cold and windy here today, but everything's pretty lovely and beautiful. And yeah, I feel really kind of enchanted by summer.
Mhm.
It's not
Mhm.
been so wet like it's been the last few years. So
Mhm.
yeah, it feels good. Hmm.
Mhm.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah, what a beautiful way to begin. Thank you.
Hmm. Okay, so Rui, I would love to invite you to start this conversation with sharing with us who you are today, um, and what you do. And if you would like to bring us on the journey of how you got to this point in this place, it would be so lovely to hear about you. Would that be
Mhm.
okay?
Sure, I can just begin and see where we go.
Yeah.
Um, it's hard. Well, you asked me who am I today? That's a hard question to answer. Yeah, because it's well, I think it's fascinating how everything is cyclical. So the way that we sometimes there are times in your life, aren't there, where it's about solidifying identities and carving out niches and boxes for yourself and going, this is who I am. This is my title. This is what I do. And then there's times in your life where it's about dismantling those and allowing yourself to be joyfully disorientated and not know who you are. What am I doing here? Who am
Mm.
I? So, yeah. Um, and I'm in a dismantling phase right now. So, and I'm also in a phase of having really defined myself through my work. I've been self-employed my entire working life, which is over 20 years now. Um, and really looking at the question of who I am beyond my work, which is lovely. But so maybe I'll start with the my background, which is that I have a background in working with the topic of sexuality, and not so much in a kind of nerdy physiology nitty gritty way, but more like sexuality being. I mean, it's the reason that we're here. Like, it's how we ended up here, and there's something very central to every human on this topic, and it connects with so many different things, our ability to be in our bodies and connect with who we are beyond our bodies, and our ability to give and to receive and to reveal ourselves, and all of these things. So people will be like, oh, Ruby works with sex, and it's like, well, I kind of like rarely work actually with sex. I work with everything around sex. So that was my previous life, and from there I became fascinated in the feminine, and sort of if you identify as a woman, how your capacity to lead might be different because of this feminine principle that we all have access to. But if you have a feminine body, maybe we have a slightly different capacity for channeling that somehow. That led me to cycle awareness. So that's since about 2017. That's been a big focus of my work. And then I have a kind of fun entrepreneurial side to me. So I invented a game last year that supports people to connect. It's a simple card game. And so my inner businesswoman gets to play with that game. And so I do that on the side as well. And I love having different parts to my work. Yeah. I don't know if that answers
Fascinating.
your question.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Love what you said in there about people thinking you work with sex, but you saying that you work with everything around it, and all those, it's so interconnected, isn't it, with all things, as all things are. But I really get the sense that experience, what you were saying, is it's guided you into your body and into your leadership and into your body's wisdom and your cycle wisdom, and then learning to express that and flow with that. It sounds like really interesting, really interesting work. So we're going to have a conversation about this intersection then of sexuality with menstrual cycle awareness. And first of all, I think it would be really useful to just, do you want to define what you mean by sexuality? Just really simply, or not, maybe it's not really simple. just there, so we can get that sense of what we're talking about, and then we can go into how that really comes up across the cycle, what the challenges are with it, what the etc. We'll go into that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I'd be able to define sexuality, because it is connected to some of the profoundest mysteries of being alive. But I can say that, we have, as a species in this particular culture, quite a limiting concept around sexuality, in that it's very much connected to our genitals. And then there's this word eros, which is often used, which I like as well, because it kind of expands our definition, and it's more to do with, on an energetic level, how life moves through us, and this dance of giving and receiving, and this dance with life. And it's not just with humans, but perhaps there is something profoundly erotic about just being alive and being connected to the elements. And that might sound a bit woo-woo. But then again, sex is also, we've managed to reduce it to something so profane and so limited, and yet there is something deeply sacred about it, because it connects us to the mystery of why we're here, what we're doing here, the nature of life somehow. Yeah. And I think I love that there's this polarity of sex being this animalistic physical act, and then something much bigger, more mysterious, more sacred. I adore that that
Mm,
polarity and the dance
mm,
of the different parts of it.
mm. Yeah, thank you. So I think that's really great because it can really sense that this is not just sex and, an intimacy with another partner or even with yourself in that way. This is more about that erotic expression and feeling and interaction with all things in the world. And I think that that's really beautiful. And I love that you've explained how, we've reduced it so much, but actually there's so much more potential within that. And when we can think about sexuality in those kind of terms, it just opens up so much more to us, more
Mm.
life, more possibility, more pleasure, and opportunities to get to know ourselves more deeply too.
Yeah. And it's such a fascinating, our relationship with our sexuality, um, as in like the aspect of sexuality that is about sharing our bodies with another human, like is such a microcosm to like much bigger topics in life, no? Like what our relationship is to trusting life, to opening, to being assertive, and all of this. So yeah.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. There's so much in there. So, oh, juicy topics. Okay, so if we bring it down to this link with menstrual cycle awareness, can you speak a bit more about how your work in the sex realm, um, why connecting with menstrual cycle awareness was that link for you, that portal into what you do now, why that was the piece that
Mhm.
really spoke to you?
Yeah. So I find it so fascinating that as someone with a female body, that I have a particular relationship to surrendering and being receptive in a sexual encounter. And yet, if I just allow myself to sort of sink into that and I lose the ability to remain assertive and also direct and co-create my experience, I'm going to end up in trouble. I'm going to end up going over my boundaries. I'm going to end up having a sexual experience that might not be very satisfying. So I need to honor my how my pleasure is connected to deep surrender, and yet also stay present and assertive and creative in, it's like such a dance. And so I just became really fascinated in that dance and um how do I stay connected to this creative leadership that wants to be be part of my encounters. And around that time I was also working as a dominatrix for a while. And
Interesting. Amazing.
yeah. That's a whole other
Yeah, I was
story.
going to say it's a whole
But
other podcast.
but I was so open and curious just to explore different facets of my sexuality. And I thought, I'll just give the kind of stereotypical dominatrix a go and see how
Mm,
that glove fits. And it just didn't at all. I felt really fake and awkward and the kind of stereotypical dominatrix who's like barking out orders and kind of cold and icy and
mm,
it just, yeah. And so then I started experimenting with like, well, when do I feel confident in leadership with a man? Like when do I feel um when do I feel joy at being in control and leading a situation, an encounter? And so I just was really curious, like, what are the ingredients? And as I mentioned earlier on, is there such a thing as feminine leadership? And this felt kind of controversial because also I was navigating in kind of queer, genderqueer circles. and the whole idea that, you know, you're, of course, gender identity and biological gender are two different things. And isn't it old fashioned to talk about feminine leadership and all of this? But I was like, but there must be something to this. So I just decided that the most logical way for me to explore that was through my body, and particularly through the womb. Maybe the womb and her deepest nature has something to reveal about the feminine. I was really, fascinated by that possibility, and so that's when I discovered, through doing research online, I discovered the Red School, and then I immediately signed up for their menstruality leadership training and began tracking my cycle, and then that whole world opened up for me. So yeah, that was the bridge.
That's so interesting how you were in that dominatrix role and you talked about wanting to be assertive and that being more of your comfort zone, but not in that expressed way of like a typical dominatrix, and then trying to find what felt good to you and noticing how that changed and shifted across what would have been maybe your cycle but might not have known it at the time. And when do you feel confident in that leadership role? I think that's such an interesting thing that we can become really aware of for ourselves in our own sexuality, in our own experiences of sex, our own interest in sex, and how our sexuality can change across the cycle. I think it's something that is incredibly empowering for people to start to think about and maybe track and become more conscious of if that's not something that's occurred to them before. So would you share with us, if you're happy to, what you noticed when you started tracking your cycle and how you noticed that you did change across your cycle in terms
With
of
my libido, you
with
mean, or like my, or
yeah,
just
maybe
in
in your
general?
libido, but also in your kind of like what came up for you. Did anything come up for
Yeah,
you around your sexuality as well?
and it's still ongoing, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that, well, a big thing that happened through my cycle awareness is starting to realize the level of trauma that I was carrying completely unaware, and how disconnected from my body I was, which was a shock because I was a trained yoga teacher. I considered myself like fairly embodied, and I realized, I wasn't at all. Um, so that was a shock, and that led me to, like, really earnestly begin the journey of reconnecting with my body and really feeling the pain of the parts that weren't connected. And I think that that's one ingredient for good sex, and being in a good sexual relationship with yourself is, your ability to really be in your body and not floating above it. Because that, I mean, engaging sexually with ourselves, with another, is a physical act, not just, but it requires that we are in our bodies, but also that's where our desires live and our boundaries live and where impulses arise from. And so it was a journey of a painful, challenging journey of realizing how disconnected I was, and then gently, or perhaps not so gently sometimes, but bit by bit, moving towards inhabiting myself more. So one of the powerful things about cycle awareness is its capacity to be this deconstruction process. So because you're just getting so intimate with yourself, you're starting to see like what is me and what is my conditioning. Which, wow, what a powerful thing to do in this lifetime. Know exactly that question. What is me and what is my conditioning? What's not true? What's not authentic? What's just like the outside world shaping me in ways that aren't really honoring to who I am and how life is? Um, so part of that conditioning is also the sexual conditioning we have, how you're meant to be as a woman sexually. And so I think that, yeah, the cycle awareness for me has been also a confronting process of like wanting. An example of that is, oh, I'm meant to want sex all the time,
Yeah, good
and
one.
and I'm there to meet my partner's needs. Like I think that's quite a kind of archetypal common dynamic. And so the cycle, an invitation to really pay attention to like what energies are there in me today, what are my impulses, what are my needs, like what am I desiring, what am I moving away from, and yeah, noticing that there are certain times in the cycle where I feel more frisky and interested in sex, and there are certain times where it's the last thing on my mind, and then there are times where I want this kind of sex or that kind of intimacy, or yeah, so it becomes more of a journey of like discovery, and perhaps easier to just meet what's there and be curious rather than have an expectation and a sense of should and guilt about not feeling the same way every day. And I don't think we realize because it's so implicit, but there is this kind of underlying narrative in our culture that we should be feeling the same way every day. Like, look at the way, the way that you guys are living in Australia towards the summer solstice and the way that we're living here in the winter solstice, probably not that different, which is insane. And the idea that we're meant to feel the same every day. We don't talk about that because it's so ingrained, but yeah.
And it's so male serving of people with male physiology and hormones where
Yeah.
it's that same cycle every day. And yeah, I think that's such an important point. And what you said there about pleasing your partner and feeling the same and being available and interested at the same level just feels
Mm-hmm.
like such a, you said ingrained and such a female pleasure is such a taboo, isn't it, for a woman to own her desires and express what she needs, and um to hold a boundary around that, like that's what she's available for and what she's not
Mm-hmm.
available for too. I want to interrupt this episode with an invitation for you to come and download your free gift, 12 magical rituals to nourish your menstrual cycle. This guide features 12 rituals, all beautiful practices, rituals, and gorgeous experiences you can give yourself in each of the 4 phases of your cycle in a winter, spring, summer, and autumn to help you to come back into a beautiful, loving, nurturing, empowering relationship with your body, your cycle, and your wild feminine power. Come and download it now from my website, www.charlottepointo.com/free gift.
Mm-hmm.
And you've said to me about menstrual cycles and sex sharing the same thread of taboo.
Mm-hmm.
Love to hear you speak more about that.
I think that's why I was so drawn to working with sex and the cycle as well, because I remember the first time I ever felt turned on. I don't know how old I was, probably like 11 or something. And I was like, what is going on in my body? Like, no one had told me about this phenomena. no one had told me about the phenomena of being aroused or turned on. So I was like bamboozled by this sense of every cell in my body dancing and being in this heavenly, blissful state. And I was like, wait a minute, you're telling me that this is wrong and sinful, because I was brought up religiously. And yet, this is the most life affirming feeling I've ever felt. Something's not adding up. And so I had an intuitive sense that there's something around the taboo that basically it means that something's very powerful and you shouldn't have access to that power, or there's something that wants to be protected and sort of taken away from your sense of empowerment or ability to understand or experience, or I think because we try so hard to reduce sex to something meaningless, like collectively, that's in response to how powerful this force really is. And I think as women, we also are blind to that. Generally speaking, there is a tendency that we forget how powerful we are as sexual beings, and that is very taboo in this world, to own how powerful you are as a sexual being. I mean, there's a human aspect of that as well, that beyond gender, that connecting with this force within you, I think, is a way of connecting with who you are beyond your mortal, physical, little human self, and kind of tapping into something much bigger and more mysterious. And there are perhaps agendas out there that would rather us stay small and not tap into the bigness of who we are. And then when it comes to bringing gender into it and power imbalances historically, that there's something dangerous, and plenty of agendas out there that would prefer women to not understand the power that we have sexually. So the taboo is a kind of way of attempting to keep the status quo. And then I think also that the cycle and the way our blood has been demonized and kept in this shroud of taboo and disgusting and shameful and a curse, that there's also something incredibly powerful about being cyclical and having a womb, and the womb's ultimate identity being a vessel for new life. I mean, wow, to be tapped into those archetypal forces of life, the amount of respect and reverence that then invites would just change everything in our society. And there are forces that would rather that not happen. So that's the taboo is a method of keeping the status quo.
Yeah, and it runs deep, doesn't it? It's something that, I see, influences us from, like you said, right from when we're really young, getting that message really soon that to feel sexual feelings and pleasure in our bodies is something that, we hide, we don't follow, we disconnect from. And, I've got, memories of similar things, happening to me when I was about that kind of age. And then just that sense of shame that came up when it was
Mm.
something that was either I mentioned or other people mentioned, and it, very quickly became something that I really, really shut down. And I think most people, in, a lot of people are really disconnected from their sexuality and
Mm.
because of that conditioning. So I think it's really powerful that you've brought that up, and how, what's taboo holds power. Yeah. And what could happen if we were all tapped into our sexual
Yeah,
pleasure and power, and what we might put up with and not put up with, and
exactly.
revolutionize.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
we're human beings on this incredible planet, and we could be creating heaven on earth, couldn't we? We could
Mm.
be creating heaven on earth, and instead we are just making a big old mess. But if we really understood the sacredness of pleasure and well-being and the life-affirming possibilities of like, yeah, being in our bodies and being joyful together, like if we owned that need and celebrated that need, then we would be creating a very different reality for ourselves, I think.
Mm.
um,
Yeah. And
but
I just got a thought about consent as well, about how, if we had that respect for our bodies and could be in our bodies and could feel, and boys and men were being taught the same thing, and that respect for each other, and um safe, healthy relationship, um I think that we wouldn't be seeing so many of the problems that we have right now if we could be in right relationship with each other, regardless of gender, but all people in our interactions, especially sexual
yeah,
interactions.
but I wonder also if there is something around like the origins of these like more Christian principles and rules around sex, like no sex before marriage, that there's something
Mm.
in like the seed, the origin of those guidelines that's actually really beautiful, because it's coming from a place that's understanding that sex is like fire. You have to be careful with it. I mean, you can create new life, so you might want to bring some awareness into that, but also it touches us in such deep ways, and it can also uh, be tainted very easily with like compensation mechanisms and impulses that come more from the shadows. Um, that we need to bring mindfulness and consciousness and integration into our experience. Otherwise, it becomes destructive. So to say like, oh, all these religious principles are really bad and we just need to be free, and well, maybe the last decades we've been on a rebound from those religious and repressive guidelines or commands, and look at where we've got. So it's like a pendulum that's swinging, and actually we need to find a kind of healthy balance where we do um yeah, like I really question the hookup culture and the sort of promiscuity and the casualness with which we treat sex. And like, as someone who really was on a soul path with trying to discover as much as possible around sexuality, I also felt like in order to like understand sex and feel like I've wrapped my mind around it, I've got it, I had to be tabooless and shameless and be able to like do everything with anyone and then realized that that's just not the right approach at all, and that where I was coming from was an attempt to try and feel a sense of like control, like, okay, I've got it, I get it, I'm not overwhelmed by this force anymore. And then I realized um was actually I ended up witnessing a porn being shot in LA. That was a whole other adventure. And I just I saw, I was on a
Mm,
live porn set seeing what sex could be reduced to,
mm,
thinking that yay, I'm on my way to like liberating myself sexually. Look how sexually liberated I am. I can hang out on a porno set in LA and it's like fine. It's like, no, this isn't fine. This is horrible. Like, I don't like this. I don't like what sex can be reduced to. I'm climbing up the wrong mountain. Actually, I
mm,
feel like I want to bring more sensitivity and more sacredness and more respect, more discernment into my sexual experience. And that's my path, actually, when it comes to liberating myself sexually, rather than anything goes, I'm shameless, bring it on. Like, there's
mm,
nothing that can phase me.
mm.
Um, that was a bit of a ramble, but yes.
Love that. I think that's such a great example of. I think it's really interesting because I've often had the thought, like, when I was young, I used to watch Sex and the City, and they're like, yeah, like girl power kind of thing. We can
Mm-hmm.
kind of be like Samantha if you've ever watched it, and have a different person every night kind of thing. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that when I've really thought about it, it's like, well, you know, just because we can doesn't mean that that's what we really feels good to us. And that's just one example, a funny reflection that I've had about Sex and the City. But I think that when we can be really tuned into what feels good to us and right to us, and know that that's enough without needing to push beyond that, we can be in safety and in self-honoring, and um and be in a better place to open as well.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But no one gets to tell you what liberated is. I love that. Everyone gets to decide for themselves. What does feeling free mean for me? And
Hmm.
for some people, like for me right now, that's being monogamous. Oh my gosh, I feel so free being monogamous.
Hmm.
But for someone else, that might be completely different. You know, it might be being wild and promiscuous, having multiple lovers, sharing your lover with another, not being sexual at all. Like, how
Hmm.
beautiful that we each get to decide. But yeah, I think it's important to have conversations like this also with our friends, with our lovers, if we have lovers, because sex is taboo, it's easy to push it to the back of our mind and kind of compartmentalize it. Oh, that's just my sex life.
Hmm.
But it's not, is it? It does ripple out into so many different facets of life. And it's, I think, because we're so domesticated in our culture, we're so sort of prim and proper and have all these social rules, and we're so disconnected from our animal selves. And
Hmm.
at the end of the day, we need to be wild sometimes. And even that word wild, we have connotations that means like loud and cathartic, and it just means like rooted into our nature, in our bodies, following impulses without the mind getting in the way. Oh, is this appropriate?
Hmm.
How am I coming across? Is this okay? Da, 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 da. We need to have times where we just let our bodies speak. And there's something very like, um, well, I don't know. I'm curious how you experience it, but for me, it just feels very like nourishing and balancing and healing. Like, I feel like I feel more integrated if I have times where my animal body can just play.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think the way you described wild for me is what it means to me. It's not about being destructive or like dirty or feral or anything like that. It's coming back to our nature, our
Yeah.
true nature, beyond all those layers of, like you said, the conditioning and the
Mm.
fitting in and being acceptable. And yeah, I definitely feel like when if there's times when I'm not tapped into my primal self, then I get sort of spun into this, up into my head and become quite
Mhm.
disconnected. And those moments then when I can just drop back in and be express, how I'm feeling in whatever way that might be. It feels so healing and soothing.
Mhm.
As well. Yeah. Thank you for asking the question. So I'm curious if we go and have a closer look at the menstrual cycle. We've
Mhm.
obviously got um different phases within the cycle, different seasons, the hormones
Mhm.
are doing different things. And you've got the follicular phase, that rising energy, that
Mhm.
more yang energy, and then the luteal phase from ovulation back towards the bleed, and that descent kind of energy, pulling you back more inwards. And ovulation being the peak of the cycle, the purpose biologically is to
Mhm.
ovulate and procreate, and hormones naturally support libido at that time.
Mhm.
But I would really like to have a chat with you um about sexuality across the cycle, and kind of like I'd love to know like where you feel really comfortable in your cycle, in your sexuality, and to share um different ways, because we all have our own unique ways of experiencing sexuality across the cycle. And just because we might be ovulating and have a biological imperative to
Mhm.
ovulate and maybe have sex, it's also true that people can connect more with their sexuality at different times. And I know that like sexual shadows can come up around ovulation time, whereas and people feel disconnected and maybe less keen to have sex and more um self-aware, or boundaries coming up, or finding it hard to drop into their bodies. Whereas for other people,
Mhm.
it's like, ah, I'm here,
Yeah.
kind of thing, that um openness and wanting to be intimate and connected.
Mhm.
I'd love to
Yeah.
just hear from you, just have that conversation about um so first of all, where is there a place where you feel more comfortable or connected to your sexuality in your cycle?
Well, to be very honest with you, I've just come out of a longer celibate period that lasted a few years. So I'm having a sort of sexual renaissance at the moment. And I'm discovering. So, but I can tell you that I'm most intrigued at the moment by period sex.
Mm,
Um, because it feels like so much more intimate
yeah.
and edgy for me. And to be met during that time by someone who's not phased, wow,
Mm,
that's powerful. It's like supporting me to access or to embrace my body in deeper ways than I have the capacity to do on my own.
mm,
And I think because the conditioning around the blood being gross or is runs so deep, even though I feel like I've done so much work on that already, but it's ongoing, it's lifelong. I mean,
yeah.
I feel like also when it comes to living cyclically, living according to your cycle, that's not something that you work towards achieving. It is a lifelong practice, and something is very relaxing about like saying that and honoring that. But yeah, so I'm curious also about the energetics of period sex, where I feel like my ability to draw my partner into like a deep bond with me energetically is enhanced during menstruation. If there's something around it that feels more profound, um, and yeah, so that's my current like growth edge or sort of part that's like speaking to me of the cycle. Um, but yeah, I mean, what's so beautiful to remember is how different it is for everyone, and I think it's really important to keep reminding ourselves of that. I was speaking to someone a couple of days ago who, because of medical reasons, doesn't have much of a cycle, but she notices that, like, when she bleeds occasionally, right before that, she feels really horny. And she was like, this isn't meant to be this way, is it? And it's like, well, actually, lots of people do have a rise in libido right before they bleed. I believe, if you want a physiological explanation, it's because there's a little peak in testosterone right before we bleed. I'm not sure why. There must be some kind of reason, but yeah. And then for other people, lots of resistance comes up to having sex before or like during ovulation, because the desire to not get pregnant is so strong that that time becomes very charged. And then for other people, it's like prime time for feeling frisky. So I think if we've been socialized as women, there's just so much conditioning around fulfilling other people's expectations, and and for example, being sexually available all the time. That it's so liberating to keep reminding ourselves that it's perhaps it's also different from cycle to cycle. Perhaps that can also be a trap to say, oh, towards ovulation, I have a tendency towards my libido rising, and yeah, to also honor that the cycle gives us access to sort of different qualities and energies within us, like maybe different archetypes. And so the kind of sex that we might be drawn to would change as well. And I can't remember who said this, but I'm so enchanted by this quote. Something like, I don't need to be polyamorous because every time I make love to my partner, I'm making love to a different woman.
Ooh.
Because yeah.
Oh, I like that.
And that, yeah, sometimes the energy that's there is a kind of wild, high energy, and sometimes it's very slow and sultry, and sometimes it's that, maybe it's more the priestess who wants to really invite someone into her world. And maybe sometimes it's like the maiden who, brings this more innocent, playful quality, or maybe sometimes more slutty and, yeah. And maybe there are archetypal sort of patterns in our cycle where we would, but again, that can become a trap.
So much goodness in there. Thank you for sharing all of that in your own experience. And with period sex, I really hear you on that, and how that's where you're currently being met and witnessed and accepted and loved, received just as you are at that time by a partner, which is so special. And I think that can be incredibly healing for people who bleed, to not need to hide it or pretend, or and to come into contact with your actual blood, and for both of you to do that, I think that's really, really special. And I think, if somebody doesn't want to have penetrative sex whilst bleeding, there's all kind, other touch, other forms of sex can be just as beautiful as a way of being intimately connected at that time too.
Yeah, or it might also be the perfect time to just come back to oneself and say, for this week, no sex, and to have that as a kind of rhythm that you can relax into. But
yeah, gorgeous. And I love the archetypes that you just shared as well. So I heard you say priestess, wanting, like,
Mhm.
inviting, that powerful energy of it being on your terms is how I felt when I heard you speak. Like,
Mhm.
I'm
Mhm.
inviting you in because I want to, and
Mhm.
this is how I'm
Mhm.
inviting you in. And I really feel like that archetype for me comes up in my premenstrual phase, in my autumn
Mhm.
time. I feel like a
Mhm.
real, once I get over this wobble, when I mentioned at the
Mhm.
start of this, I'm in
Yeah.
this wobble. And then after the wobble settles, I feel this priestess sort of energy rising in me. And I feel like I can really,
Mhm.
um, yeah, the way you described it, I thought, oh yeah, that's how I feel in my premenstruum. And the maiden for me is where I currently am experiencing challenges more so
Mhm.
with my sexuality at that time, which makes
Mhm.
sense, brings up shadows from my maidenhood time of
Mhm.
life. But I feel like that's the time when I need to be slow and gentle and really going at my own pace and like being intimate if I want to be, but always knowing I can say yes and then say no and kind of
Mhm.
dance with what's coming up. I feel like it's a real shadow time for me. Whereas my husband just got the snip this year. So
Mhm.
the challenges that you mentioned about, um, if you're not wanting to fall pregnant,
Mhm.
it's
Mhm.
something that has just lifted for us. And
Mhm.
that time of thinking, oh, and now I feel like we can both just be very present with each other in more of a playful way and an exploratory way as well, without having
Mhm.
this thing in the back of our mind going like,
Mhm.
warning, warning, warning. You don't want to
Mhm.
have we've got 3 children, so we're
Mhm.
quite happy with
You're
that.
done.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's so
And
interesting, isn't it?
what is it that helps you stay in integrity and really ask for what you need?
Oh, it's such a good question. It's for me, it's listening to myself. Um, and honoring that, because for a lot of my life I've pushed through what my body has been telling me, um, in order to just fit in or play the part or
Mhm.
um, please or um, not wanting anything to come up, kind of trauma wise
Mhm.
or trigger
Yeah.
wise, or
Don't
just
want to be
like, no,
complicated.
yeah, just push it away, just don't
Mhm.
think about it, kind of thing. But I've learned that I really cannot do that. If something
Mhm.
comes up for me, it's like, aha, I need to listen and honor that. And then being met and held in that is
Mhm.
very, very healing. And so I find that the more I can just listen and say, this is how I'm feeling right now. And, as you've said, it can be different cycle to cycle. So sometimes I'll feel so, I'll feel really good and
Mm.
enjoy that time of my cycle. And other times I think I'm going well and fine. And then, something can pop
Mm.
up. But I think it's that listening in the
Yeah.
moment and just being where I'm at, not where I wish or think I
Exactly.
should be.
Yeah. I think that's so beautiful what you're describing. Like it's a kind of emotional maturity that we don't have much education around. And this sort of cultural autopilot is to, romanticize relationships because we want our partners to kind of meet our unfulfilled childhood needs. And therefore, there's a sense that this needs to be perfect and feel lovely all the time. And
Like
we
a
wear
fairy
those
tale.
very things. Yeah. And actually, yeah, relationships and, yeah, it's about how do you navigate the challenges and the shadows and the twists and turns of life together with honesty and openness and compassion and just be with what is. because that's what it's about, not like, oh, it's going to be lovely and we're going to both come at the same time and have multiple orgasms and it's going to, uh, yeah, I think that is a interesting definition of emotional maturity, and we need to talk about that much more. And
Mm.
especially the gendered aspect, as people socialized as women are so used to accommodating other people's needs and neglecting our own needs, that it's so powerful to reach a point where you're like, I'm not going to do that anymore. And sometimes we're forced into it because our bodies come up with like weird symptoms, and
Yeah.
don't have much of a choice. But to start prioritizing our sense of integrity and well-being over keeping things smooth, not being complicated, making sure our partner has a good time, like that's a very pivotal, important point.
Mm.
Which maybe it's not as simple as, oh, I've reached that point and now it's always easy. No,
Yeah,
wouldn't that be
no. Yeah.
nice?
Yeah. And I think really this is something that, like you said, it's something that you always work through. But I think over the last few years, this is something that's finally dropped in for me. And having cycle awareness as an ally has been just so powerful, and understanding for me, the archetypes of maiden, mother,
Mhm,
Marga or enchantress, and crone.
mhm,
And for me, recognizing that I have these shadows that come up at this springtime, like when my bleed ends, and in that first, before I get towards my summer, for me, understanding that that can, be the maiden energy archetypally, and, linked to maybe that phase of your life, or the tenderness and that kind of like transitional point from inwards to back in relating to people again, perhaps
mhm,
for me. And having just learning about that and experiencing it, and tracking it, and just noticing how my sexuality does cycle,
mhm,
making that link between how I experienced that point and where I am, has just been completely powerful, and really forgiving. It feels really, it's like, oh, there's nothing wrong with you. I think you
mm,
can feel sometimes as well. It's like, oh, what's going on here? But it's like, oh, I have this awareness that, maybe something might come up for me, maybe not. Um, just this is that point of my cycle to be tender with myself, and to listen deeply, instead of being really thrown by things as it comes up. It's like, oh,
mhm,
it's really changed my relationship, I think, to myself, to sex, to pleasure, to my body, to my experiences, and yeah, to my partner, to be able to have that language as well. Mm.
mm. Have you been with your partner? Like, have they been able to witness your journey into cycle awareness and see how you've changed?
Yeah, so we've been together for a really long time. I was
Oh, yeah, you said, yeah.
yeah, I was 19 when we got together, and so yeah, 18 years. It's been a really long time. It's been like my whole really my whole adult life.
Mhm,
Um and yeah, cycle awareness has been really powerful for the both of us. I mean, I was on the pill for a long, long time.
mhm,
So it was something that was kind of shut down. My libido was just really non-existent, and I didn't have any relationship to my libido at all until I came off the pill.
mhm,
Um,
mhm,
when I was it was about 10 years ago. Yeah. Yeah, nearly 10 years ago. And so then discovering it for myself at that time, and my partner, my husband, discovering it as well at the same, we did it kind of together,
mhm,
and it's supported him to understand. And he now is like, oh, where, always wants to know where I am, and
mhm,
he's tracking, and he said to me today, oh, you're going to be bleeding at Christmas, aren't you? And how are we going to, manage that? And I was like, oh, That's so
Oh,
lovely. Because
mm,
I'd just clocked that at the same sort of time. I hadn't really thought
mhm,
about it before. And to feel not alone in
mhm,
in this, it's a really beautiful thing.
mm.
Hmm.
I love that. And
Yeah.
also, I feel like when we are in touch with our cycles and the different, how we are, how what comes through us, how we express ourselves changes day by day. There's something awe-inspiring in that, I think. And when our partners are full of, yeah, awe and intrigue and want to support us with that, I think it restores a dignity that is very beautiful and powerful.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ruby. I've loved this conversation. I think it's just been so rich um and deep and really gone into other realms as well and
Mhm.
really illuminated how all these things are connected and love the conversations about um taboo and relating to ourselves and um understanding what feels good for us as well as
Mhm.
and then being able to share that and be sort of flexible and let go of any ideas of perfection, maybe of this is how it should be, or this is what the textbook says, and giving ourselves permission to be where we're at any given point and knowing that that can really change. Thank
Yeah.
you.
I love having conversations because like this, because then through your awareness and questions and what you share, then I am able to think about things in a different way. So it's beautiful for me also to affirm again the power of cycle awareness for deconstructing our conditioning and just like
Mm,
really inhabiting ourselves and our truth and the link between that and our sexuality. And yeah, it's been
amazing.
lovely to connect.
And you. Thank you, Ruby.
Mm.
So, where can people find you and your work and your game as well, and any
Yeah,
other
so
offerings you have?
if you go to rubymay.co, that's kind of my umbrella site that links you to various places. So yeah, I do international shipping for my game,
Mm,
uh, and my website Know Your Flow. That's where you can, because I brought out a cycle tracking journal last year that comes from the lens of the kind of what we've been talking about, the power of cycle awareness for deconstructing conditioning. Um, so it's Know Your Flow, Menstrual Cycle Awareness for Personal and Planetary Revolution. So that's available from my website as well.
that's a great title. Love that. I'm going to go check that out. Thank you. I'll pop all of these links into the show notes. And so, yeah, go and follow and find Ruby's work. And thank you so much, Ruby.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening in. If you're loving this podcast and you'd love to help me spread the wisdom shared, please leave a review or rating or share this with somebody who you think would love to listen in. I'm really passionate about creating ripples of change and getting this information to more women, girls, and people with a cycle so that they can reclaim their cyclic natures too. And if you'd love to dive in deeper with learning more about how to connect with your cycle and rites of passages, come and join our free Wild Flow Circle community or choose a course and learn with me on my online learning hub. All the links are in the show notes. And until next time, be well and go with the flow of your cyclic nature.